Prioritizing research papers is kind of a tricky thing. We often work on several research papers, or that's kind of somewhat of the norm is to have several things on the go. But I wanted to talk about that today. How do you prioritize research papers? What's the sort of rule with it? Um, so, from my perspective, in terms of prioritizing research papers, you should be always just working on the thing that is closest to completion, right? So what that means is you might be thinking of doing many different projects, and this is what's going to happen is that it's going to constrain you to work on one or two projects unless there's something going on. Now, one of the challenges that I face is that there's several things that are very close to completion. This was I think this was advice from Linda Johnson from Administrative Science Quarterly, and she was like the editor for many years there. But what you need to do, or the managing editor, um, what you need to do is think about like how close you are to completion, and then figure out like, okay, which paper are we gonna work on because of that. So it ends up being you're only really working on one or two at most at any given time. I do not believe that you can multitask and have multiple papers on the go. That's just like a complete lie. In fact, it's a very exploitive kind of relationship to have many different papers on the go because you're not going to be able to do them. It takes several weeks to get into them. So, the challenge that I'm thinking about is I have right now two papers that are sort of pressing to get out, and they're equally at the same sort of pace. And I don't know what to do other than the fact I just have to complete one before the other. And they're both it's not going to sort of matter so much. And I sort of worry and ponder about those. But the only thing that you can do is just work on one and focus on that particular thing to get it out the door, and try not to worry about all the other stuff that goes on. Um, and that's kind of the challenge, right? Because you're always thinking, but then I have to do this thing and I have to get to it. But there's only so much time that you have in the day. And I am very much a sort of let's maximize the amount of things that we can do in a day. But by the time that you actually get things done and you work on it, you typically like even if you work a solid 8 hours of writing, there's not a lot that you can actually accomplish. You could do about, for me, I could do about 10 pages of writing, and that still is a lot for most people. That's still like an extreme amount, but that's still only 10 pages that you can write in a day. So you can only write, maximum, you know, maybe 30 pages in a week, right? Which seems like a lot or an extreme amount, but still not that much, right? Like that's still not enough in terms of the expectation. And so you have to sort of know that it's going to take a great deal of effort to actually get there, and you have to sort of pare back your estimates and how long things are going to take. So for me, I'm halfway done ish of getting a paper off my desk, and I still have to analyze data, which it's probably still going to take me another week to get this done. But I'm you know pressuring in my head that I have to get back to something else because I have, um, you know, co-authors that are waiting for things, and the challenge is figuring out like of pushing back and saying it's okay to get this done. Because here's the problem, right? Like if you're going to work on multiple things all at once, and you work on something for an hour here, an hour there, and something else, what ends up happening is nothing really gets done, because by the time that you get into it, there's kind of a switching cost that's involved, which is the cost of switching between projects. By the time you actually get into it, it takes a couple hours of getting into something. So there's real physical switching costs between them, because you can't just pick up something where you left off. You have to read what you did and understand and process what you did and get back into it. And so the more that you can keep with something, the less switching costs you actually have, right? This is like a real thing in production management, in factory floors, right? You don't want to switch between different um, processes too quickly, because there's setup time, right? So if you're switching between, I used to work in a plastics plant, and if you're switching between plastics, different sort of molds, the die takes about a week to 10 days to set up. So you want to maximize the amount that you're actually working on, and you're producing, and then switch, because it's very time consuming. It's the same thing with working on papers or anything else in your life. There's these switching costs that are involved, and you have to maximize how much you actually work on it. So you have to take a step back and realize that, man, you just have to sort of take a step back and just say, hey, it is what it is, right? Like, I have to work on this, and unfortunately something else has to get pushed back. And that's what you have to do, is sort of prioritize, in the sense of, I just need to work on this one thing, and then I switch once that is done and go on to something else. So with that, I think, a couple of lessons to be learned. You can't work on many papers all at once, because there's just switching costs. If you're kind of doing, you're not pulling your weight in other things, right? And that's an important part. And then the other thing is that there's switching costs involved. So you need to focus on things as much as you can, and then switch to something else whenever it gets, whenever you can't manage it, or whenever you're done, right? And switch to the next project. So hopefully you learned something from this. I don't know. It's a real struggle for me. I've been doing this for many years. I'm sure it's a real struggle for everybody else, and sort of prioritizing these things. But there's no right answers, but you have to assume that there are switching costs involved, and you need to prioritize. Anyways, take care and have a wonderful day.